Hello, you're listening to Future Artifacts FM, a radio show hosted by Niamh Schmidtke and Nina Davies.
Earlier this year, several radio frequencies were discovered airing a collection of broadcasts. At first, they sounded like regular news stories and interviews. They felt familiar, but also not quite belonging to our present. Slowly, the listeners came to believe that what they were listening to did indeed belong to their world, just not their time. They were looking into the future through the mundane edges of radio recordings and public service announcements. While this material is still being meticulously studied by researchers in various universities and museums, your hosts have managed to gain access to this collection to air a selection of these broadcasts for you, our listeners.
For full disclosure, we will not be sharing this collection with you, as this introduction is based on a fictional event. In this monthly broadcast, Future Artifacts FM, we will present speculative fiction pieces by artists and writers, followed by conversation with hosts Niamh Schmidtke and Nina Davies. The programme will focus on fictional works intended for broadcast, such as radio plays or fictional interviews, to carve out a better understanding of the now by exploring various interpretations of the future. Welcome back, everyone, to episode 18 of Future Artifacts FM X The Couch, the online space of Het Hem. We're really thrilled to bring you back to the second episode of our collaboration on magic and technology. I'm Niamh Schmidtke, and this is
Nina Davies.
We're really thrilled to invite the work of Jan Berger on today's episode. Welcome, Jan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we're recording this episode on Zoom today because we're all once again, in different countries. Niamh's in Scotland. I'm in London. I feel like I'm always in London. And Jan is speaking to us from Berlin.
Yeah, it's quite frightening, no?
Yeah. How have we already asked how you are? You have already asked.
No, you didn't.
Oh, okay.
No. I'm good. Yeah, thank you. How are you?
We're good. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah. Are you sure?
Yeah, just to give yeah, I'm good. So just to give a quick little introduction to Jan's work. Jan Berger, born in 1993, is a visual artist and platform designer based in Berlin. His practice is primarily occupied with ludic simulation, subject formation, and the emergence of cultural mythologies in online spaces. He is the founder and attending curator of the Mythical Institution, a digital project space and art school. At St. Jennifer, he streams gameplay on Twitch TV. And hopefully we'll get a chance in the conversation to maybe introduce and talk about some of your other work. But before we go into your work, which is called A Bell is Tolling, which is a 10-minute mix, Jan, I was wondering whether you could just describe the work and how it relates to your practice, because obviously the mix is sort of in your words, a sort of Christmas-themed sound work that you've done for us, which pulls music from video games that you play within. So yeah, I was wondering whether you could just give a brief little introduction before we head into it.
Oh, yeah, right. So in my work, I usually understand video games as platforms for deriving some kind of cultural production on, or enable some collaborative artistic practice. I see it as a space for, a conceptual space for artistic agency that also can teach us how we work together as artists in 2023. I also use video game platforms to distill cultural analysis from as spaces where subjectivity is greatly, or the development of subjectivity is greatly accelerated. It just happens so fast. And I see video games, often online video games, as social spaces and test beds for strategies or prototyping of methods you can use or you can make use of as an artist.
And I guess the thing that makes this piece a bit different to some of the works we've previously featured on the show is you're specifically describing this as a mix or a medley, a festive. I mean, a bell is tolling. It's lots of different bell-like sounds to kind of
help us all get in the festive season as we record this in December, and it also will be released to you later, the listeners later in December. What makes this kind of different from some of the works we've had on the show before is kind of you're very specifically kind of taking the soundtracks of these games not as kind of your raw material for this audio mix.
And before we listen to it, I shall add that the mix is an epic journey through gloomy, dramatic, epic video game music that can serve as a backdrop to your journey through the darkest of all months and through the season finale of this year, 2023.
Great. We will see you on the other side. Enjoy.
Welcome back, everyone, to after listening to Jan Berger's piece, A Bell is Tolling. So, to start off the conversation, Jan, I was wondering if you could describe some of the games that you've pulled tracks from, as many of these games contain tropes of fantasy. Perhaps you could talk a little bit as well about how you see the connection between magic and fantasy.
Oh, yeah, specifically in those games that I pulled the music from, magic is often treated as something that is, of course, outlandish. No, I mean, there's like different races that are magical, like whatever in Final Fantasy. That was the first track that played. There's like magical creatures that are often in a very tropey way associated with being very primal or ancestral figures to the world we're looking at. Or in also a lot of games, magic is used as the primary way to dispose of enemies. Like you have access to magical abilities that, I don't know, destroy your foe or whatever. And or of course, like this trope where magic is associated again with nature or with a deep understanding of the world that is often inherited. It's also often used as a way to other certain people that are of magic origin as something that is quite outlandish. And oh my god, someone can heal. The world or the video game worlds are often seen through this lens of magic and fantasy. Yeah. The ordinary versus the magical. Technology as something that is man-made versus magic which is primal or ancient. Yeah. Or even sometimes magic is also can be extracted from natural resources. It can be extracted from monsters. So there's something that is not only distinct to technology, but there's also something inherent to technology, magic as technology that can be harnessed.
When we were having kind of a pre-chat before the recording, one of the things we were talking about as well, in terms of thinking about magic and fantasy specifically in video games, or kind of the tropes within a lot of video game worlds, obviously not all, but a lot of the ones that are featured in this mix, is that they seem to go into the past, or like magic is something that's almost medieval or, as you're saying, ancient, rather than something that's contemporary, or it's almost like the opposite of the contemporary. You know, magic is maybe this form of embodied or organic knowledge, whereas technology is this very contemporary and maybe distant form of knowledge.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, totally. It's also a trope that, you know, at some point you just don't know anymore if it's super contemporary, like code, or if it's like, yeah, an ancient magic, no? It's also in the recent rise of crypto cults or so. It's a conflation of many different things like esotericism, Jesus Christ, blockchain, Web3 protocols, transhumanism, posthumanism, the end of the world in the biblical sense, the end of a world in a very tech eschatological sense, the basilisk. Did I mention Jesus Christ? Yeah, it's a conflation of a lot of different things that play into this aesthetic. Or, like I said in the beginning, in certain games, technology is also... I mean, what is also really prevalent in games is this cyberpunk kind of thing, where there's technology really, really obviously juxtaposed to magic as something to reinforce these notions of nature versus technology, dirty versus pure, to really make sure that the player really gets these grand themes of the game, right?
So like quite visually present as well. It's not just a subtle undertone, but it's very much in your face. This is, you know, like
Very
thinking
much
of
so.
steampunk, like the conical eye or the kind of mechanical hand.
Yeah, and also a fascination with the Middle Ages in your example with steampunk, which is way more like instead of planes, you have like airships or something that run on steam, which is also like a very tropey aesthetic that is very prevalent in video games. But also the aesthetic markers of this cyberpunk thing. You have like a gloomy city and the rural kind of village where people just harvest potatoes or whatever. I guess it's sets the scene, and it also forces the player to see the world that is presented through this exact cliched lens, and then make your own assessments of the world as the player as you go along.
So I wanted to bring up this idea of the quest, which traditionally are stories about a character-forming journey in which the protagonist will often encounter otherworldly forces or beings. And this playlist, for obvious reasons, is sort of the perfect soundtrack for a quest. Would you say that quests are all relevant to the games that you've pulled these tracks from?
Yeah, I guess quests are some vehicle or some container for narratives they help you as a player to grasp deeper understanding of the world you're thrown in, I guess. Because you're, as the player, you're not native to the world, the people who inhabit the world are. And usually, I mean, you're not the avatar you're playing, you are the player, and you take control of that person or object or whatever. So I guess I'm not sure if quests are really relevant, but they are a narrative device in most games, I guess. And especially in those games, the tracks of the games or found in the games are used in the mix, which are all very, very story or narrative heavy, being RPGs, that is roleplay games, where you mostly follow a set party of characters that all have their own understanding of the world, and which deepens as you go along and learn how the world works through the eyes of the player, of the group you're following. And you also get accustomed to the kind of spiritual basic of the world, or the spiritual principles. And narratives can also serve to let the player understand what goes on in the world in terms of what's wrong with the world and where does it fail to serve the people who inhabit it. And you all see that through the quest line, the main quest, I would say.
One of the things I'm kind of thinking about in terms of that quest is also, I mean, we spoke before about like the kind of the world building of these songs, of these soundtracks, you know, and how very often these soundtracks are to also get you in a specific kind of mood for either, let's say, the scene within the gaming world that you're within, or the character that you're playing through, whether that be through like a single main character, a group, or that you're shifting in between. When you're putting together this mix or this medley, when I listen to it, that I think about is also like, what phase of the game or of the quest are we in when we're listening to these tracks? Because obviously when they're taken out of context, there's kind of this festive bell tolling sound, but when they're, let's say, in context, how much are you thinking of that being in context when you're putting together a mix like this?
I guess when it comes to the mix, I try to chain together, like, it's kind of like a DJ thing where you want to chain together tracks that just work together, I guess, and to have some kind of variety. So you want to start with a chill track or so, and then it goes very dramatic or whatever when people are ready to hear it, no? When people are ready for the drama, it comes, no? And I mean, also in relation to your question before, I think the mood is very, very obvious in most of these tracks. I mean, the soundtrack of a game is supposed to help you ease into the logics of the game, right? For example, the theme of a villain is always very emotive, I would say, in a sense that it can have conflicting vibe, and the villain is also probably not that purely evil, or he is purely evil if the theme is purely evil. Like, it really helps you to characterize or to grasp the characterization of a figure in the world better. And also the scene, if the scene is meant to be dramatic, if there's someone dying or whatever, you want a dramatic track to be playing, and in relation to the question we had before, how relevant are quests to the game? I talked about the main quest, so to say, and we follow the main party of the game. But of course, there's also antagonists, who kind of try to oppose you or act from behind the scenes or so. And what I find super interesting about this dichotomy between the main quest and also other characters that try to hinder you from your main quest is that often in RPGs there is a group of characters who are similar to your group but act in total opposite interests. And villains can often be understood as main characters who have fallen from grace, who have divorced themselves from the spiritual understanding of the world and placed themselves deliberately outside the plot. And ironically, that totally evokes a deeper spiritual understanding of the world for the player, because that's the complete antithesis. So not only is it important the quest you follow, like actively in the game, but everything that happens around and how the world is organized in that sense. Like Lucifer, no, it's like Satan, who's also like a fallen angel, and that's completely intrinsic to understanding, I guess, paradise or whatever, no?
I feel like we've spoken a lot about narratives and kind of like the tropes that certain narratives assume in terms of thinking about the quest and following these kind of biblical senses of quest. And maybe something to think about specifically with this set of games in this mix is, how does the fantasy build RPG narrative? So thinking about Final Fantasy, what is the role of the fantasy in that narrative? And going past that point as well, what are some of the limits of these fantasy tropes? So I think we spoke before about them enforcing certain stereotypes or presuming stereotypes. How does fantasy build the narrative, and then what are the limitations of that fantasy?
Yeah. Like I said, in these very traditional RPGs, the kind of path is set, really. I mean, you basically follow a group of mostly kind of like outcasts or whatever, and you see the world, or you experience the world through their body. And that makes kind of like the course of the game quite limited in many senses. It doesn't need to be, though, because, I mean, that's only the way you're supposed to play the game. Of course, you can inhabit the world also in these RPGs, these more traditional worlds, in another sense. Like, who tells you that you have to actually play the game as it wants you to play it? For example, the speedrun scene is a very good example of how to break away from how video games want you to play them, in a sense that speedrunners just try to finish a game as fast as possible, and that can be done through breaking the game, through glitching, through walls, through just mashing through the text. You don't even want to see the story unfold because you actually exactly know how it unfolds, no? So that's kind of more like a formal way to break away from the constraints of an RPG narrative. Or often in my work, I also pursue textual approaches of uncovering the hidden mechanics of the world in an analytical sense, I guess.
My impression from speaking to you as well is that it both the RPG narrative is quite strict in terms of it's like, follow this path. You may have paths that will lead you off, but ultimately you're going towards the same point. I guess I'm wondering, are there like tropes within fantasy that you feel are particularly strict in terms of like keeping you on that singular narrative? And maybe if there's ways to break out of them within these games?
I mean, in a sense, video games are just like books or so. Like, there's different methods to interpret them. And the very literal meaning of a game is often very, very literal, in a sense that especially traditional RPGs are very tropey. I mean, there's an evil empire, there is a marginalized magical race that, like, and there's genocide, and then, I mean, obviously that's bad, and you're meant to feel bad, and this is how those traditional RPGs are structured, no? What I'm more interested in is the hidden meaning of a video game text, and how that can be made manifest through analysis.
So your work sometimes looks at how identity is formed and created in virtual worlds. We previously spoke about the difference between how identity is formed in role-playing games, which we sort of have already started to touch on, like RPG games and world-building games. And I was wondering if you could first describe the difference between these two types of games. As I said, we've already kind of started to delve into RPG games. But yeah, so the difference about these two types. And then maybe once you've set out the description of these two, how you think identity is constructed in each of these kinds of spaces.
Yeah, so when it comes to these more traditional RPGs that I took the music from mostly in the mix, those are really about following a set path, yeah? And you learn how the world works through the eyes of the protagonists, and this is kind of your set path as the player. There's no way of changing identity straight in the game or so. It's more of, I would say, an experience through someone else. So that's more of the conceptual realm of these games, I guess. And like I said, then there's multiple methods of how to embed the player in the narrative. There's an opposing force. There is, of course, the world that you interact with, your deepening knowledge about the world, you identifying what the world runs on, and ultimately what kind of world you want to see. And in that sense, when it comes to those games, I'm more interested in the analysis of its implications in a very interpretive sense, and also how you can use these platforms as a player to kind of subvert the usual course of events, I guess. I mean, you can just stay in one place and, I don't know, ask everyone in one town about a specific thing, or you can really use the platform in some kind of limited way, I guess, because the narrative is set, the story is set. One NPC can only say like 3 things or so, and you have to get creative to really break the system, I guess. And in contrast to that, I guess, social online places like Roblox or Second Life are way more focused on social interactions, on the of tropes or of trends or of social codes. No, these can really grow very, very naturally because everyone is in the world and they choose their own fighter. I mean, they behave how they want to behave, and it's just as a performance as the kind of static characters in an RPG perform. No, they perform their character. They are the emo. They are the tomboy. Of course, a lesbian. Yeah, but also not outright because it's only in the subtext. And in for example Roblox, you also have your very tropey character usually, the one you want to inhabit, and that's how you interact with other people. And I find that interesting in a sense that how can you navigate subjectivity? What kind of aesthetic or other markers can you introduce to the world in order to let a certain subjectivity arise? Like, you can form the game, you can shape it in some kind of way. I mean, in the end, you're also just there as a player, and you're one of many in the world, and you try to get into the groove of the game, into the groove of the group you're joining, and there's also social codes you have to abide to if you want to be in the group. If you deliberately want to be an outsider, you can disregard that entirely.
A lot of the RPG games that are featured in the mix, most of them are from kind of the late 90s, early 2000s, yet a lot of these online gaming spaces are much newer. And part of me is also thinking about this creation of identity in the present, especially, like, I would say more and more like a fixation towards labels in terms of thinking about like labels, like thinking about like the queer world and how you're not just a lesbian, it's like you're a butch lesbian or you're a femme lesbian, or you know, if you're a gay man, like the myriad of terms that can be. I'm kind of wondering also about those creations of identity becoming more distinct and more layered in these like more social world building games. I mean, would you say that's fair, that it feels like it's becoming more complex as time goes on?
I'm not sure if it becomes more complex. I mean, there were online boards or online games in the 90s as well. And I mean, there's always a certain direction those games take without moderation, I guess. I mean, in Second Life, there's a huge BDSM scene or so. No, it always gets very kinky. And my current interest lies in Roblox and how very cultic games have spawned within Roblox, which is it's a game hosting and online multiplayer environment that is predominantly accessed by teenagers. And apparently teenagers are very into cultic stuff. Like, it's insane, no? And especially when it comes to LGBT groups in Roblox that are also at the same time pro plastic surgery, pro Satanism, pro religion that is subverted beyond comprehension, like sermons about gay Jesus are being held, and at the same time people are just forcefully made subject to plastic surgery, like enforced plastic surgery when they're not fulfilling a certain Sex and the City standard of being like tall and skinny. And that's kind of like the subjectivity I'm really fascinated by when it comes to those online video game social spaces, because it happens so fast and it's conflated with so many different things.
My interpretation of that is thinking about the character you are in the game space versus the person you are in, like, I guess I heard this description years ago of like the meat world and the virtual world, how your body is, let's say, on the planet versus how your body is in the game space. Is part of that intention towards getting surgery to appear more like the game version, or just within the subculture that you kind of follow in the game space?
If anything, I wouldn't like my Roblox avatar to be a perfect mirror image of my character in the meat world, yeah. And I think what's so interesting about video game platforms is that they can serve as spaces to rework your identity, to go about identity in a playful way, in a way that you can try things, playtest things, prototype things, remix things. I mean, yeah, definitely. Sign me up for plastic surgery, enforced plastic surgery. Give me liposuction, make my avatar look like whatever, yeah? I mean, if it's not in the game, where else would you be able to try that? Of course, there's limits to the experimentation part of video games, just like there's limits in online boards, like if we think of 4chan and how it went bad when it was mainly a platform for eschewing hate speech, racism, Islamophobia, and when trolls took over to misuse the platform like that. The same can happen in games, especially in Roblox, where this kind of remix culture can easily lead to the conflation of, let's say, LGBTQ progressiveness in tandem with Islamophobia. Yeah, so Roblox is totally also a place that, if left unchecked, pinkwashing can totally occur.
I know that some of your previous work with the Mythical Institution was all made in Minecraft, and that's where you used to work. And do you feel that you're now heading more into working in Roblox? Do you see those two platforms doing something completely different? And
oh yeah,
if so, how are they different?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, every platform has their own quirks or so. In Minecraft, it's more about the capability of deriving some kind of cultural mythologies through building. I mean, that's intrinsic to the game. And also intrinsic to the game is the extraction of the land. I mean, you basically extract things to use them again for your own benefit or for building your house, no? I mean, you dig up soil and then you build your dirt hut, and then at some point you have mined your diamond gear. And we can use the platform even though or for other purposes than for its original purpose, which is, in the case of Minecraft, the complete neoliberal liberal ecstasy of optimizing a supply chain, going from wood to metal to gold to diamond, and instead use what the game has to offer to investigate on alternative ways of generation within the game. And ultimately, in the case of the Mythical Institution, we use that for a collaborative cultural production, that really happened between artists on the platform. And on Roblox, I guess it's more about the social interaction and less about the gameplay, I guess. It's a lot about representation and a lot of style. I mean, there are some certain kind of status symbols. For example, I realized a lot of very fashionable Roblox characters, they don't have a visible head. So it's kind of their hair floating on like a missing head. And also sometimes accessories like glasses. I have no idea what that means, but some very, very popular Roblox characters have that, like the missing head thing. And you can't get it anymore. It was limited. Yeah.
Would something like the Mythical Institution, which is indeed this mythical institution that you've built in Minecraft, would that be able to exist in a game like Roblox? And if it did, what would be different?
Tough question. I mean, the Mythical Institution really... it wasn't planned out all the way from the beginning. We used Minecraft because of its specific gameplay elements of having to extract from the world and rebuild it. And in that sense, the gameplay elements also influenced our narrative of how we use the platform, And in the end, it turned out to be an institution that generated its own legacy through building and through inviting people to the institution on the server and them shaping it by sometimes using the game how it intends to be used and sometimes just deliberately sidestepping it. So in a sense, gameplay is super important for me, but also what I find most interesting is to disregard the meta game of a game, which is like certain conventions the game wants you to follow in order to play it optimally. And the interesting part comes in when you deliberately not do that and try to find holes or poke holes in the narrative of the game and find how you can subvert it or just use it as a toolbox for yourself. Use it as a medium, the game as a medium, not in a goal in itself. Yeah, I find it super unimportant to play the game as intended in an artistic sense. As a hobby, I love to do that.
That's interesting because I guess I was interested because it seemed like the Mythical Institution is what you were trying to create there was a sort of a cultural capital rather than a material in inverted commas.
Also some that works outside of the game. Like you don't need to play the game to experience the Mythical Institution's work, but it can now act independent from it through further production, like videos, like text, like graphics, people telling you about it, like experiences were happening throughout. So and people were part of that. So it's something that was enabled through the gameplay, through the game, but is now. It's just the foundation of it. I mean, you can get,
Well, yeah, and I guess I was going to say then with Roblox, like cultural capital is sort of the game, and I guess I'm interested in how a game like Roblox could be subverted.
I guess, subversion is fine and all, and it's like. Fun if it happens or whatever, but what I'm interested in specifically in Roblox is how players on Roblox seem to kind of, or how the platform itself established some sort of overarching narrative that people in Roblox kind of abide to, like the kind of head thing I just told you about, like fashion people, like Roblox fashion people who also sell fashion items on the platform. They love this headless kind of avatar thing, which is like, it's apparently a social code that is, for someone who's not like 14 years old or so, I guess, very, I mean, seems outlandish, no? I don't know why it's en vogue, but it certainly is. And so I do want to work with the platform for its capacity to generate, for user-generated worlds that are just weird and very how can I say that? I want to say they're just insanely fascinating what teenagers can do with the platform. And I mean, Roblox is a platform where teenagers make worlds, so they build games. That's something that's not easy. It's not an easy feat. And some of these worlds are incredibly impressive in terms of the social dynamics that unfold. There's a game that I'm currently fascinated with that is an LGBT space that is also pro-cannibalism. There are public killings. There is one overlord kind of femme, tall, skinny woman who used to read from the gay Bible to in order to kind of tell her community about how gay Jesus died for the gays. It's kind of like the platform enables one to just do some weird reinterpretation of history.
It feels like the contemporary version of fan fiction for maybe more like our generation when we were teenagers. Like, I feel like when fan fiction was so like huge on Tumblr and so on, and now it's obviously people still write fan fiction, but it's definitely not at the scale, I feel like, as it was maybe like 10, 15, 20 years ago. Whereas what you're describing sort of sounds like a similar desire to make this version of a world that you don't see in the present, or you don't see in, let's say, like mass distributed literature or culture. So it's like, okay, I'll make my own. So I guess to kind of finish up, and maybe to think about also this work within kind of more generally what we look at in future artifacts. We're often, like Nina and myself, we're often thinking about how fiction is used as a tool to consider the present. So fiction is a way to perhaps reveal a more truthful version of the present than, facts or kind of media will give us. And then in terms of what your work is looking at, kind of thinking about how fiction becomes an operative mode in games. So whether it's the plot or maybe the creation of identity or the creation of fictional meeting points, or even of this cannibalistic world for queers. And the question I guess I have coming from that is, within these techniques of subversion that you use, so kind of like, how do I play against the narrative of the game? What realities do you think gaming worlds represent? So obviously it's very broad, but what realities do you think Roblox represent?
Roblox is a curious case because, in general, online spaces enable vastly accelerated formation of subjectivities because they're online and they're just accessible. Media in general, if we think about TikTok, the trend cycles are just insanely fast, and they're over faster than politics. That's something that I'm interested in conceptually when it comes to the realm of Roblox, or Roblox as a material for artistic exploration of the medium. No, so it's not the work; it's really the tool I'm using, and yeah, that's my interest in Roblox. What I'm interested in when working with video games is to extract something that also holds true in the hidden text of the game, or in the very literal sense of the game, is something that also holds true, or that is true to how our world functions, how our world operates, and what maybe can be learned from that, and maybe what can be practiced in the video game world as a behavior for the real world, I guess. That doesn't mean like you can save the world by playing video games or whatever, but I guess it's a great place to prototype. It's a great place to let certain things just organically grow from the conditions you set in the video game. And that's why I'm also interested in Roblox, because there it happens like in every single game almost. Like, it's really a user-generated platform where probably the most creative group of all, like teenagers, make their games and distribute them and have other people join. So that's the fascination. And yeah, that's probably also the reason why there's so many weird games about Satanism and role-playing as, I don't know, an orphan, and as an LGBTQ supermodel that wants to learn about gay Jesus or whatever. Yeah, wild.
Maybe coming back to some of the RPG games that are featured in the mix, kind of what do you find as being perhaps maybe the most different about the narratives within those games versus these ones that are made within Roblox?
I guess they serve different purposes. I mean, the reason why Roblox is so popular with teenagers, the reason why Roblox is so popular with teenagers is that it offers a space to just hang out in and interact with people you might know, like the people from your class or whatever, from your school, or totally random people that embody an avatar in the world. They can be like Roblox celebrities also, I guess. So I guess what makes Roblox also resonate with the vibe of 2023 is that it's just a place to hang out in, and it's a place to fit in. It's a place to be, to kind of I mean, you can just also experiment with your avatar. Do you want to be the underdog? Just try it. Do you want to be a Satanist? Just try it. Do you want to fit into the group? Do you want to be a fashionable Roblox avatar? By all means, try. Yeah, you can still fail. Just because you have the fantasy of being one of these groups doesn't mean that the Roblox kind of like social climate allows you to be any of those. In the end, it's another, I mean, also Roblox imitates real life, no? In a sense that there are tropes, there are social customs in Roblox. Social hierarchies are in Roblox just like there are in our world, no? So it's not just this place where everything is like hunky-dory and you can have fun until, I don't know, until your parents say you have to go to bed. No, it's also a place where social hierarchies apply, and sometimes they are quite tough and might be even more strict than in our real kind of bodily world, like flesh world, no? That, and also consistent with my kind of anecdote I told you about these live killings in this one LGBT group in Roblox. I mean, consequences can be that, no? In real life, you're not gonna be, I guess usually you're not gonna be ritualistically sacrificed because you're not tall and skinny or whatever lets you fit into the group. And it can be a valuable experience, I guess. I mean, being sacrificed in a sacrificial kind of satanic ritual. How great does that sound? You don't die, it's just a game.
Yeah. Before we wrap up the episode, is there anything that you would like to draw our listeners' attention to that you're working on, that you're showing, that's coming up soon?
So, At the moment, I'm working on a Roblox game that I'm building with a game developer, and we're trying to use the platform of Roblox in order to establish a collaborative production on a Roblox server that is entirely avatar based. We use the system of Roblox to establish a working method for artistic exploration of the medium, and at the same time financialize these efforts while being super fashionable.
Looking forward to playing Roblox for the first time to play this when it's out.
Yeah, maybe we invite you if you have a fashionable avatar. Yeah.
Okay, I'll have to start working on it. Cool.
Super exclusive. Great. Thanks, Jan, for joining us and making this festive mix for us for the show. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. Once again, we have one more episode coming up in February with Hem for our Magic and Technology mini series. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Hope you all enjoy the festive season.
Bye.